we got to talk about Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo. We have kicked this segment down the road so far now because it feels like every time we want to talk about these guys, breaking news comes up. The Randy trade happens. The Scott Service firing happens. There's all these things going on and on. The Mariners have an awful road trip where it's like nobody's going to want to hear about a positive story because that's not the main story. But finally, we can highlight these dudes because they deserve it, man. They have been awesome all year in the second half. And when we said they had to take a step forward in the latter half of the season for the Mariners to have a chance, they've done that.
Let me put this into context a little bit regarding how they've stepped forward versus the Mariners' rotation. I think Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo have taken bigger steps forward in year 2 than the other two Mariners developed arms in this rotation, in Logan Gilbert and George Kirby. In terms of improvement, I think they've improved more than those two did in their years 1 to 2. That's really what we're talking about. And I think no one epitomizes that more than, I'd say, like Bryce does. Like, Bryce had a lot to work on last year, but he's turned it around this year, and he has been underratedly one of the best pitchers in the American League coming here down the stretch. So let's put a little bit more context behind this. You and I highlighted the last time we hosted Brock and Salk that Bryce Miller and Bryan Woo had to pitch better down the stretch for the Mariners to have a chance at the playoffs. Well, they've been one of the main reasons why the Mariners still have a chance at the playoffs. Listen to these August stats for these two. Bryce is running out a 2.22 ERA in a little over 28 innings in August, 34 strikeouts to just 4 walks, 175, 206, 330 slash line. Now, Bryan Woo has a 1.59 ERA in the month of August, 34 innings, 31 strikeouts, 3 walks, and a 164, 190, 238 slash line. It's pretty insane for guys who, I mean, at this time of year, could be running into a wall or peaking, actually.
So let's put that into even a little bit more context. You said Bryce Miller's August ERA is 2.22. In July, it was 1.80. In other words, he's had an unreal second half. His second half ERA last year was 4.60. 4.60. Now, Bryan Woo, his second half ERA, 1.65 right now. 1.65. His second half ERA last year, 4.58. So you're talking about two guys that have gone from essentially 4.6 ERAs in the second half in their rookie year to basically both close to sub 2. Woo's below 2. Bryce is right about there. That's pretty remarkable. For year 1 and year 2 development, for two guys that weren't high draft picks, we talked about the fact last year Bryce Miller just isn't going to be able to get away with 2 pitches for much longer. We said about this time last year, he has to add something in the offseason. Well, he did, and we can get to that. But just talking about the lack of hitting the wall for each of these guys now in year 2, it's been the biggest difference maker in this rotation.
Really, just like they've been the two most consistent guys here in the second half in this rotation, which it's crazy to think about in that case. So I want to go one pitcher by one pitcher, so we give each guy a proper amount of time. I didn't even realize this looking at Bryce's Savant page. He's up to throwing 7 pitches now on the season. He threw 7 pitches in his last start, and I saw a little of this highlighted online, and I was digging into it a little more, and I agree with this sentiment, is that Bryce Miller's last start, which he made on Monday, you make it on Monday or Tuesday, whichever day against the Rays it was, struck out 10 over 7 innings, 7 with allowed 1 run, threw just 91 pitches, so the efficiency was there as well. He threw all 7 of his pitches in that start and was able to get out pitches on his fastball, his splitter, and his knuckle curve. And his knuckle curve, in case you're not familiar, he added that pitch and has thrown it a lot more over the last 2 months. And it's really helped him out to sort of balance having an out pitch versus righties versus lefties, because Bryce's combo against lefties is fastball splitter. His combo against righties is fastball knuckleball. And that's big. We thought the splitter would be sort of a buy-out pitch. Like he could get both righties and lefties out on that pitch without really much of an issue. But once adding the knuckle curve and making the adjustment to his splitter that he did, where he said he wanted to, instead of letting it sort of float arm side, he was going to bring it back over the plate and just try and throw it right at that bottom rung in the strike zone. It has paid immense dividends for Bryce Miller. And he looks, all of a sudden, like one of the most complete pitchers in this rotation in terms of everything he offers. His only thing is pitching on the road, which is why, Lyle, this upcoming road trip is so huge for Bryce. He's got 2 road starts coming up on this 10-game road trip. So he's got to go out there, and I'm hoping, based on some of these tweaks he's made here in the second half with the knuckle curve and the splitter, that he goes out there and he pitches much better on the road. Because eventually someone is going to need to defeat this narrative that this pitching staff can't pitch outside of T-Mobile Park, because the numbers suggest something otherwise.
If you actually look at it starter by starter, there are a couple guys that can pitch well on the road in this rotation. Wu pitches pretty well on the road. I believe Logan pitches pretty well on the road. Yeah. I think Kirby and Bryce are the two that really struggle away from T-Mobile. I can double check that here while we're talking, but I believe it's those two that really struggle, and it's Logan and Bryan that have had some success. But yes, Bryce Miller specifically, it's been pretty well highlighted. His career ERA inside T-Mobile Park is 2.79, and on the road it's 4.95. It's a pretty drastic difference. Bryce Miller's not a perfect pitcher yet. I don't know if the perfect pitcher even exists, but Bryce Miller's not totally there yet. Again, he still has to pitch better on the road. He's still getting hit pretty hard, but you know what? Logan Gilbert got hit pretty hard early on in his career, and then eventually started to figure it out a little bit. He cut it down a little. Now, similar to Logan, Bryce may just give up home runs in his career. It may just be a part of his game with his fastball usage, but that doesn't mean his hard hit rate can't go down over time. So there are things for Bryce Miller to still improve on as time goes on, but for a guy that's in year 2, it's been pretty remarkable what he's been able to do. And now the next step, to your point, is can he go out on the road and look like he has looked at home? Because if he can, especially during this stretch where they need every win they can get, it's going to be another telling sign.
How about this rotation and their ability to just not walk guys? Like Bryce early in the season walked a ton of batters. In 53 and a third innings, here in the last 2 months, he's walked 5 batters. It's like him and Wu have essentially just quit on walking batters. It's pretty crazy. The ability to, like, Bryce filled up the zone pretty well last year too, but now he's doing it while having a more efficient swing and miss profile as well, which is,
right.
Man, it's impressive. And it leads to a couple of things that are just like something you wouldn't, if you're not a Mariner fan, you might not know this. Bryce Miller is 4th in Major League Baseball in WHIP. In all of baseball. It goes Logan Gilbert 1st, Tyler Glasnow 2nd, Tarek Skubal 3rd. So 3 pretty good pitchers. And then Bryce Miller is 4th of that group. Fewest earned base runners allowed per inning, essentially, is what WHIP is. But here's the other, just one that might just go over your head. He has the most starts in baseball of 6 shutout.
It's wild.
You wouldn't think
really
of that.
Wild. No, you would think somebody like Logan would just simply have more, but it's Bryce Miller. It's pretty good. In fact, it's really good. Man, and there are so many things he's really taken steps forward with this year. I mean, in addition to everything we've already mentioned, to focus in on a splitter a little bit more. Let's say this again. How many times did we harp on in the second half of last year? Look, Bryce Miller isn't just going to add a pitch midseason. You can't do it. Nobody can, for the most part. This offseason, he's probably going to need to devote time to finding a third pitch. He did. Well, now he has 7, but the real third pitch is this splitter. What has it done this year? Well, opponents are hitting 165 against it. They're slugging 256, and the expected batting average on it, 192. So Bryce Miller in one offseason has said, look, I have the 2 pitches. I've got to find something else. I have to find something to neutralize lefties and keep guys a little more off balance because I just can't throw this many fastballs. Well, he's found it. It's been an awesome pitch. The run value speaks for itself on it too. And guys don't hit it. So shout out to you, Bryce Miller, because clearly clearly you had a plan for this offseason, you attacked it, and it's working. Because now your OPS against lefties, once upon a time, it was over 900 a year ago for the season. Over 900. And that was a narrative around Bryce Miller is you just can't do that in year two. It's too drastic. Well, lefties have started to hit him a little bit harder as of late, but overall for the year, his OPS against lefties, 699. He has totally neutralized lefties, and that mark is perfectly reasonable, manageable. I'd even call it a pretty good mark for the most part. He is not letting lefties destroy him anymore. Righties still don't hit him at all. Their OPS is 500. But he has really kept lefties in check this year, and a lot of that has to do with the splitter usage.
Here's the last note on Bryce Miller, and I want everyone to keep this in mind when you watch him here over the final month of the season. He is now officially in uncharted territory innings-wise. He is a third of an inning past his mark from last season. So every out he gets from here on out is a mark he has yet to cross in his life, innings count-wise. So just keep that in mind. There could be a wall here for Bryce Miller in terms of durability. I hope there's not. The Mariners' playoff hopes can hinge on him not hitting a wall. It would certainly help a lot because the pitching is what is carrying this team. But I just want people to keep that in mind as Bryce goes into this month. Now, for the next guy, Lyle, that's not going to be the case. He could have a month similar to what he just had, and then he would just reach his mark from last season.
Right. And that would be Bryan Wu. 20 seconds before we get to Wu, just to answer the question about pitcher by pitcher in terms of road ERA. So Logan and Kirby actually have both been at about mid-ground now, given how their last couple of starts have each gone on the road. So Logan's road ERA is now 381 for the year, and Kirby's is 392. So yeah, paired with Bryce Miller's being close to 5, this rotation as a whole just has to pitch better on the road. It's great you pitch well at home, but it's got to be a little bit better than that on the road, especially in this final month. Anyway,
right.
Bryan Wu has pitched amazing on the road. But to look at him as a whole, again, we talked about it just a couple minutes ago. A year ago, his second half ERA was 4.58. Now it sits at 1.65. Where do you want to start with this guy? I mean, I love watching Bryan Wu. He's my favorite guy in the rotation to watch pitch. Where do we even want to start? Honestly, can we just start with the walks? The fact he is actually walking less batters than George Kirby. The fact he is legitimately, for the guy who's been tabbed as the king of not walking guys, the king of command in George Kirby. Bryan Wu, for a guy that actually walked a fair amount of hitters a year ago, now has just decided, I don't walk anybody anymore. He's in the 99th percentile of the league in walk rate. It's crazy.
Well, where I actually wanted to start is where I say I was wrong.
Oh, you were wrong.
He can start game 3. He could start game 3.
Wow. It's like music to the ears. It's almost like, I know ball, as what's his name, as Roman would say, acknowledge me.
So the walks are incredible.
Right. I got it right. Yeah. Woo! Oh, yeah, I deserve a round of applause, especially after the fact you dropped an F-bomb on me the first time I dropped that take saying I was crazy, and then a bunch of people online said the same thing. Yeah, I do deserve my flowers on this.
Well,
but I'm glad you
pat yourself on the back and buy yourself a gold medal or something.
That sounds nice.
Congratulations.
I will pat myself on the back. Anyway, go ahead.
So the walks are pretty insane. It's also, I just can't get over his fastballs. Just can't. This physically should not be possible, what he's doing with his fastballs. He throws his 2 fastballs 75% of the time, and the combined slugs under 300. That's insane. When Luis Castillo first got here and we highlighted his insane fastball usage, he was not throwing it 75% of the time. When you throw a pitch 75% of the time, the hitter usually has a pretty good idea of what's coming. And he still can't hit it. He can't do any damage on that pitch. That's pretty insane. When we talked about his whip numbers, he would be first in baseball in whip if he was qualified. And the Mariners would have 3 of the top 5 starters in baseball when it comes to walks and hits per innings pitch, which I think is insane. But there's just no better like no better success story of the Mariners pitching development than there is of Bryan Woo. Like, it just continues to amaze, like, what they have managed to find with some of this scouting and the development within their organization. Like, Bryan Woo was not good in college. He was not good. Not a good pitcher. This isn't a compliment for Bryan Woo, but Lyle will get this joke. He would have fit right in on the ASU baseball pitching staff in college. He would have been perfect. But Bryan Woo has come to the big leagues, and he has been unbelievable. And the biggest knock on him, and the reason I refuse to say he should start game 3, I'm like, well, he doesn't pitch deep enough into games. Well, he just pitched the most innings he has in August of any month of his career in 34 innings. He has pitched into the 7th inning in each of his last 5 starts. Right after I said that, he does that. So he's essentially going like this to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were looking down, so I needed to make sure you're doing it. In case you're just listening, I was flipping Lyle the double bird and moving up and down.
Yes.
So that's what Bryan Woo thinks about me saying he can't pitch deep into games. Yeah, Blake Snell, guess what? You guys are familiar with the Blake Snell quote where he's like, don't doubt me about pitching deep into games. So that was Bryan Woo to the Marine Lair podcast, or half of the pod.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's half. Some people on this podcast said, I want Bryan Woo starting game 3 no matter what. And like I said, I'm getting my flowers now. You know what I actually want to circle back to? Because to your point, yeah, Bryan Woo, Cal Poly product, had Tommy John surgery in college, 6th round pick. College numbers were not great. He was mostly a reliever, honestly, in college. But clearly, the Mariners loved his stuff, and for good reason. You know what I want to circle back to here for a second? So Trent Blank, who is on the Mariners pitching staff, on the big league staff, he said that, what's his technical role? Major League Pitching Coordinator? Is that what it is? Here.
That sounds right.
He is, Director of Pitching Strategy. I think that's what it is. Okay.
Close enough.
Anyway, yeah. So anyway, he said at one point, Aaron Goldsmith brought this up on a broadcast last year. He said that when they were scouting Bryan Woo and doing everything for the draft back in 2021, their whole evaluation process, apparently Trent Blank likes Bryan Woo so much, he would have taken him with the number 1 pick in the draft, despite the awful numbers he had in college. And the reason I was looking away when you were giving me and everybody the double bird is because I wanted to check something here. The 2021 draft. I'm looking at the first round all of a sudden, and I'm sitting here saying, does Trent Blank actually know ball? And obviously he knows ball because he's great at his job and is a huge reason this rotation's been so good.
That was Henry Davis, right?
So let's go down the list really quick here. Here's some of the high-end first-round pitchers in that draft. Jack Leiter went 2. Well, we know how that's gone so far. Yeah. Jackson Jobe went 3. Now, his upside is actually supposed to be very good. We'll see what he does as a big leaguer, but he has not pitched in the big leagues yet, so we'll see. Frank Mazzucato went 7 to the Royals. He's been awful in the minor leagues. You keep going down the list. Sam Bachman at 9 to the Angels in a classic Angels pick. The guy's now a reliever, and he's not even a very good reliever. Kumar Rocker went 10 to the Mets. He is not a New York Met. He didn't even sign. And he's still not in the big leagues with the Rangers either. Andrew Painter went 13. Again, his upside's good, but he hasn't pitched in the big leagues yet. Obviously, his ceiling is very, very high, and he has a chance to be really good with the Phillies, but we'll see. Will Bednar goes 14. Keep going down in this draft. Michael McGreevy goes 18. Gunnar Hoagland goes 19. Jordan Wicks goes 21. He hasn't been great in the big league so far. Gavin Williams goes 23. Now, he's been pretty good for the Guardians, but Ryan Cusick goes 24. Chase Petty went 26. Maddox Bruns goes 29 to the Dodgers. The point of this is, I don't think you can definitively say any of those guys have been better than Bryan Woo. I honestly, I'll just put my stamp on it. None of those guys have been better than Bryan Woo's been, especially with what he's done this year. So that all goes back to the point. Now, would it have looked absolutely crazy at the time to see Bryan Woo go in the top 5 of the draft? Not that the Mariners had a top 5 pick, but still, the Mariners had taken Bryan Woo in that first round at 14 over Harry Ford, or 12, I'm sorry, over Harry Ford. People would have been like, what is going on? But they clearly saw something. They clearly loved something. They got him at great value. And now, I mean, his upside is just so insane. So insane. So, again, I'm sure that story was supposed to be a little bit of an exaggeration because obviously in when it all came down to it, Scott Hunter, the entire draft team, Jerry, Justin did not say we're taking Bryan Woo in the first round. But point is, this Mariners pitching group looked at him, said, oh yeah, we've got something here, and they were absolutely right.
So what about him though in August? What has allowed him to continue to take this step, Laux? The story's great, but in reality, it's the combination of those two fastballs. But we talked a little bit, similar to Bryce, that he needed a second pitch, and he had his changeup. He threw it 4% of the time last season, and it's been up and down usage-wise this year. It's interesting. Bryan Woo's 2 best months of the year was the first month he came back in May. That was the first month he was back. And then in August. Those were his 2 best two best ERA months of the year. Any coincidence or not, it was the 2 months he threw his changeup the most. So he threw it 9% in May. He threw it 12% in August, which is the highest percent he's ever thrown his changeup in a month. And it's important because we talk about neutralizing lefties, and Bryan Woo struggled with lefties last year. When he gets a chance to throw that pitch more, it is very effective. He allowed just a 195 slug on that pitch, run values 3, and it's a pitch he almost exclusively throws to lefties, 23% of the time. So if you match up the percentages, it's 75% fastball, 23% changeup to lefties. It worked out, right? And it's effective for him. It's that third pitch that righties can't do anything on his fastball. Lefties have a better chance against it. And that's why he needs the changeup. So it's good. It's good to see that pitch coming along. I'm curious if he throws a little bit more than that, but it's a good development.
Lefties don't have that much better a chance. You want to talk about the OPSs again? Bryan Woo, after getting crushed by lefties last year, another guy who had a 900 OPS facing lefties, 517. Opponents, left-handed batters, putting up a 517 OPS against Bryan Woo. Righties are putting up a 418 OPS. So yes, by technical definition, lefties have a better chance. But yeah, this guy's insane. And the changeup usage is so crucial because as great as those fastballs are, at some point, yeah, you still need the third pitch, and he didn't throw that changeup much last year. He threw it less than 4% of the time, and when he was throwing it, it wasn't all that effective. Now, all of a sudden, it's much closer to the 10% range, and it's very effective. I mean, I still think one of his breaking balls at some point in time here also has a chance to be a really good pitch because the actual pure shape and stuff of it is really good. I was reading an article last year and over the winter, too. I went back and read it on Pitcher List just about how unique Bryan Woo is. So come year 3, maybe one of his breaking balls also has the chance to take a real step forward because he's so early on in his career. He hasn't even come close to 200 big league innings yet. So he's got so much time ahead of him, and this is what he's already done. It's pretty wild.
Super exciting. And the Mariners are very appreciative of these performances here in August. Because Logan Gilbert and George Kirby have had their bumps this month. So have Luis Castillo. But these two, it's been steady.
Let me make one more point. Because for those who didn't hear, Cal Raleigh went on Mookie Betts' podcast recently. And they actually spent some time talking about Bryan Woo. And Mookie Betts, future Hall of Famer Mookie Betts, slam dunk Hall of Famer, is sitting there talking about Bryan Woo. And he's like, that guy is nasty. Betts is sitting there saying, you're looking at his fastball, it's there, and then all of a sudden it isn't. It just isn't there. That's basically how Mookie described it. It moves like crazy, and Cal said he has a chance to be really, really special. And kind of like, I know I've talked more about the stories here than the numbers of Woo, and you spent some time on the numbers, but Cal was talking about how when Woo kind of had that bump in the road, middle of the year, where he kept having these minor injuries flare up on him, they talked about, Cal said, this has been written about, I believe Cal talked about it on the podcast a little bit, that they sat and had a very real conversation about I think your preparation as a big leaguer, it has been good so far, but it's got to change a little bit. You got to be willing to adapt a little bit because it can be even better. And as a big leaguer, you just have to get used to adapting and changing some of your routines in order to continue finding success. And as we all know, Cal has the utmost respect of not just everybody on the team, but certainly everybody in the rotation. Wu took that seriously. And since that time, that is right when he started going on this stretch of going over 6 innings, 7 innings, etc., and just dominating opponents. It's made a big difference. So shout out to Cal Raleigh and all this too, but Bryan Wu's acceptance of understanding he needs to change some things and change his routine and process a little bit more, just another thing that's helped him take a step forward. So pretty cool.